Welcome back. As we continue working forward, what we want to do next is on server one, we want to create a shared folder and we want to put into the shared folder any of our web content that we've already done. We've already done work creating a website on server one, and it'd be nice if we could reuse some of that. So we're going to create a shared folder on server one and then show you how on Linux how to connect to a Windows shared folder. So then once we've got that, then we're going to go over to Linux and connect to that shared folder. And what we need to do then is go find where are the web documents on Linux for the Apache web server. Take a look at those, and what we'll find is that the default permissions don't allow us to make any changes to the web document. So we'll look then how do you change permissions on to a file or folder in Linux. Then what we'll do is we'll copy over some of those files that whatever we need from that shared folder on server one into the web server folder on LNX, and then we'll modify or customize the default web page for Apache 2, and then we'll test it. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with that. So I'm over here on my server one, and I've created a temp folder. Actually, I had it created, and it's already been shared. I used it for passing around some of my certificates. So what I did was I copied into it the contents of my IIS web server, and let's go look at where that at. So for Internet Information Server, the default location is the C drive, inet pub, and then www root. So those were the files. So I've got that good to go. Now to verify that, then what we could do this from where we're doing it from server one or from any of the other hosts, Windows 10, Windows 11, is just verify that the shared folder is available. That looks good. So then let's go over to Linux and see what it takes to attach to that. All right, so I'm back over onto my Linux box, and the default file manager in OpenSUSE 15 is Dolphin, but there are two versions of Dolphin. Let's go ahead and open Dolphin. This version of Dolphin is your everyday file, move, workaround. There's a short video in Canvas on Dolphin, a couple-minute video, but you've got different things here. It's a popular and feature-rich file browser, file explorer, different settings. If you want to go up a directory, you do it here. If you want to go down, you do it here. It defaults to the home directory. Let's navigate up. There's the root. You remember where our web server documents are? They're under SRV, www root htdoc. So there's the current web page. If we open it with Firefox, we'll see that it works. Now the thing about this particular, the one that's off of the start menu here, Dolphin, is it doesn't allow you to do much with permissions. It's safeguarded. So for example, if we wanted to modify this file, I'll open it with the Kate editor, and let's say that I just wanted to make a modification to it and say, woohoo. I go to save that. Let's see what happens. It tells me that I can't. The document cannot be saved. It's not possible to write, and that's a permissions issue. So we'll go ahead and discard that. If we take a look at the file, if we go to the properties of it and we go to permissions, we can see that we don't have any control here. If we go to advanced, we're locked out. And Windows has its way of doing permissions, Linux has its way of doing permissions, and they're just two different systems, and you get used to each one. The Linux one is in some ways simpler in that it only has three permissions: read, write, and execute. Sometimes write is referred to as modified. So you can see there I wasn't able to change the permissions on it. Really what I need to do is I need to change the permissions on the root folder here. And again, you can see I don't have any option to do that. So what we need to do that is we need to open the super user version of File Manager. Now the File Manager is Dolphin. That's actually what it is, but here it's called Dolphin, and here it's called File Manager. They're one and the same. And when you're trying to learn about it or read about it, the names are interchangeable. I gave my password, and so I opened the file manager super user mode, and you can see here running Dolphin as root can be dangerous, so be careful. So what I can do then is I can navigate back up, and I can go to SRV, www root, and now when I go to the properties of this, I'll have some control. So you can see now I have options here. What I want to do is I want to set view and modify for the three groups: owner, group, and other, or the three entities, the three objects. Okay. And I know you're thinking, wow, we're not really explaining a lot about how the permissions work in Linux. And you're right. There is a web document linked in Canvas. There's also a web document linked on basic HTML modification. There's several documents there. There's a 2-minute video on using Dolphin. There's some things there that will help you. So now that I've done that, I can shrink this down here. And if I go to, I'm back to my normal Dolphin here. And I go into permissions, and you can see we've got view and modify. All right, so that's part of it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to split windows here, and then over in this window, my active window, I'm going to go to network, and I'm going to add a network folder. Actually, I'm going to do this. Nope, excuse me, I'm going to do this. Microsoft Windows Network Drive. The name is whatever you want to call it. I'm going to call it Server 1 Temp. We do have to remember that things in Linux are case sensitive. We use upper and lower case in Windows without really a lot of concern, but in Linux they are case sensitive, and a better Linux etiquette would be this. Okay, the name of the server, I'm going to give it the fully qualified domain name. And then the folder is the temp folder. Okay. I'll just work my way through the boxes here. I created an R.Graves account for myself. We all have the administrator account. Yeah, I don't want to use the wallet. Okay. Okay, so it came up here. That is actually the location here. You can see it here. And this is a lot of web browsers. We don't do this much in Windows, but a lot of web browsers will actually accept a command like that. smb://user at, and then the name. And that's a common practice in Linux to get to Windows shares, is to go ahead and use your web browser. No, I don't think that that Internet Explorer does, I don't think Edge does either. So what I've got here is I've got then my two windows. Let me select this window and I'll go back to home. Okay, so over here on the right then I've now gained access to that shared folder over on server 1. Over here on the left, I'm looking at my Linux file system. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to navigate up to SRV root, www, htdocs, and I'm going to copy over the files that I intend to use. So I'd like to use, well, I'll grab all three of my picture files and my already configured web page. Okay. Now, this is the default web page here, as we've talked about. If we open it with Kate, well, we did already. It's real simple. If we open it with Firefox, it just says it works. So there's not a lot to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rename it. I'm going to call it Index Original. And I'm going to rename this one then lost my place there for a minute. .html. Each different web server has its own names that work for the default website. Microsoft is pretty liberal. You can do like default HTML, iisstart.htm, and so on. But Apache is looking for a file index.htm. Let's just see what happens if it'll actually open. It may need some modification. Oh, it opened pretty good. The name's wrong and whatnot. And so from here out, I can now tweak it. And that's what I'm going to turn you loose to do. So let's go back and look at our notes and just review briefly. So what have we done? We created a shared folder, and so we demonstrated to you, or together we demonstrated how do you connect a Linux machine to a Windows shared folder, and we showed you how to do that in using Dolphin or File Manager. Pretty straightforward. And then you can also, in Dolphin and File Manager, you can save that once you've made that connection. Remember, there's no drive letters in Linux, and so you just save references. After we did that, we went in, we used Dolphin in the super user mode, and we modified the permissions on the htdoc folder to allow us read and write. I believe it was view and modify was what it said. After we did that, then it allowed us to edit the existing files in there and to copy in our own files, and we did. Copied in some files that we pulled over from our Windows web server. We're then able to modify the default web page, create our own default web page, and so on. So the last thing to do then is to test and see if that default web page is showing up on my other host. And so let me get set up to do that. So I'm over on my Windows 11 machine, and I'll also go test on server 1, but I'll do that off video just to not take your time. And it came up just fine. Now we do have to realize we didn't install a certificate. There is an extra credit option, and it's a pretty good amount of extra credit if you'd like to go ahead and generate a certificate for your Apache server and install it and be able to have this convert over to HTTPS. Okay. So there we go. We've done quite a bit of things now with Linux, and we'll step away now from this project and move on to our next. And I'll look for any questions or collaboration among the class through our group. So thank you, and I hope that you're seeing the value of Linux. It's an incredibly powerful tool. And oh, one last thing. We sometimes miss this, but everything that we do with Linux is free. You think, well, what do you mean? Well, with a Windows web server, which is great and easy to set up and all that kind of stuff, but you have to have a Windows license. And the least expensive Windows license is $700. Where with Linux, there's no cost. We're using OpenSUSE. You see, it's updating. It's supported, well, community supported, and yet we're able to do DNS and we can do some DHCP. We can do a web server. We can do a lot of things. We can do a file and print server. There's just a lot of stuff we can do, and it's on a platform that's open source, and that there are no costs involved. And sometimes we lose sight of that from our perspective, where we just have Windows licenses available to us for training. So I just want to make that point. All right, I hope you enjoyed that, and I'll wrap this up, and we'll see you in the next project.